Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're heading to the Middle East, where things have been pretty intense lately.
Yeah, no kidding.
There are a couple of major developments happening that might seem unconnected at first, but
But are they really? I think that's what we are here to find out.
right, we're going to untangle these events using two news articles, one from Sky News and one from the Associated Press,
Both published on March 17th, 2025.
to try and figure out what's really going on over there.
It'll be interesting to hear from some of the people caught in the crossfire.
Definitely, their perspective is so important to understand the human cost of this conflict.
And I think we can also get a better understanding of the motives behind the violence.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then a bigger picture, too, what it all means for global stability.
It's a lot to unpack, but that's what these deep dives are all about, right?
Okay, so let's start with Syria. Sky News has this really eye-opening report about the violence in cities like Jalba, and it paints a pretty grim picture. Yeah, they describe once bustling streets now just eerily silent, patrolled by armed security forces.
Wow.
And the buildings are all messed up, bullet holes and burned out and just debris everywhere. Just shows you the brutal reality of what's happening over there.
It's a stark reminder of how quickly things can unravel. Remember, just a few months ago, in December 2024, Bashar al-Assad was removed from power.
Yeah, I remember.
And there was this brief moment of hope.
Right, like maybe things would finally change for the better.
Exactly. But then in early March 2025, violence just explodes.
And it's been really bad for the Alawites, right?
The Alawites.
Yeah, they're a religious minority in Syria.
Yeah.
Sky News says that thousands of them have fled their homes and are seeking refuge at the Russian Hymym air base.
That's awful. It must be terrifying for them.
It is. One Alawite woman named Adiba Shahedi spoke to Sky News, and she barely escaped with her life. She said she saw horrific attacks and killings and just utter destruction of her community.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is. It makes you wonder, why are the Alawites being targeted so brutally?
Well, to understand that, you have to go back a bit. During Assad's regime, the Alawites were a major part of his support base.
Oh, I see.
So now with Assad gone, they're seen as complicit in the atrocities committed by the previous government. And they're facing these revenge attacks from groups who want to, well, make them pay.
That's a scary cycle of violence. It just keeps going and going.
It really does, and it can be so hard to break free from.
And it's not just isolated attacks either. Sky News reports that they found mass graves in villages like Al-Sanabar. Villagers were digging graves under the cover of darkness, burying their friends and family.
Wow, that's a chilling image.
In one place, they buried 80 people, and from a single village, they recovered 223 bodies. It's just horrific.
It really highlights the scale of the violence and how deep these wounds run.
So what's the new Syrian government doing about all of this?
Well, Sky News spoke to Mustafa Kunefeh, the head of General Security.
Okay.
He admitted that these atrocities are happening, and he blamed what he called undisciplined groups acting outside of official command.
So he's saying that the government isn't behind this violence.
That's what he's claiming. He also said that they're committed to bringing those responsible to justice and restoring peace, but
Well, can they really do that?
that's a tough question. Syria is so divided right now. It's going to be really difficult to disarm all these factions and address the grievances that are fueling this conflict.
And everyone wants justice, right?
Yeah, and everyone has a different idea of what justice looks like.
Sky News also spoke to a Sunni Muslim named Imad Batar, who lost his father in attacks by Assad loyalists.
Oh, wow.
He wants peace, but he believes the only way to achieve that is by capturing all the remaining Assad fighters.
And on the other side, you have Alawites who are terrified for their lives and just want to be safe.
It's like everyone's trapped in this cycle of pain and revenge.
It's a really complex situation with no easy answers, and it makes you think about how focusing on one side's idea of justice over another just might be driving this conflict further.
That's a really good point. It's a heartbreaking situation, and finding a path to peace in Syria is going to be really, really tough. But we're not done yet. Up next, we're going to shift gears and talk about Yemen, where U.S. involvement has taken a dramatic turn under the Trump administration. So, Yemen. It feels like every time we talk about the Middle East, Yemen is always in the background, always in a state of conflict.
It's been a really tough situation for so long now. A brutal civil war, humanitarian crises, and now increased U.S. involvement.
Right, and that's what our second source is all about, this AP article about the U.S. airstrikes against Yemen's Houthi rebels. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, it really highlights how much things have escalated, especially since Trump came back into office.
I mean, we're not just talking about a couple of strikes here and there. This is a whole new wave of attacks with significant casualties. Even children have been killed. It's really heavy situation.
It's a big shift from how things were under the Biden administration. Remember, they were trying to keep things more contained, trying to avoid civilian casualties, and really trying to prevent that Yemen conflict from completely blowing up again.
Yeah, it was a more hands-off approach.
Huh.
But Trump seems to be taking things in a whole different direction. He's talking about using overwhelming lethal force to achieve his objectives. That's some pretty strong language.
It is, and it makes you wonder, what are the potential consequences of this kind of aggressive approach? The Houthis aren't just some random group, you know. They're a powerful force in Yemen. They're deeply involved in that ongoing civil war, and they've got these strong ties to Iran.
Yeah, that's the part that always throws a wrench in the works, right? Iran's involvement in Yemen just adds another layer of complexity.
Right. It's like it's not just about Yemen anymore. It becomes this proxy conflict between the U.S. and Iran playing out on Yemeni soil. And honestly, it's the Yemeni people who end up suffering the most.
It's true. They're caught in the middle of this geopolitical chess match. Before we go too far down that road, though, I think it's important to back up a bit. Who exactly are these Houthis? Maybe you could give us a little bit of background for those who might not be totally familiar with them.
Sure. The Houthis, or Ansar Allah, as they also call themselves, are a Zaidi Shia Muslim group. They've been fighting for control in Yemen for years. They see themselves as resisting foreign interference and corruption within the Yemeni government. So you've got this mix of religious and political motivations driving them.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about their connection with Iran? How deep does that really go?
Well, it's definitely complicated. Tehran may not be calling all the shots, but they're providing the Houthis with a lot of support. We're talking about weapons, training, financial aid, the whole package. And that's what really worries Saudi Arabia and the U.S. They see it as Iran trying to expand its influence in the region and threaten their interests.
So it's like everyone's using Yemen as a battleground to fight their own wars.
In a way, yes. And in the middle of all of this, you have the Yemeni people just trying to survive. It's a truly awful situation.
So the AP article mentions that the Houthis have attacked a lot of merchant vessels, more than 100, in fact.
Wow, over 100.
With some even sunk and sailors killed. They're saying they're doing this to pressure Israel to try and get them to end their blockade of the Gaza Strip.
It's a risky strategy, though. It could easily backfire and just lead to more violence and more suffering. You have to wonder if there might be more effective ways for them to achieve their goals.
It's definitely a dangerous game they're playing. Okay, so we've got the Houthis attacking ships. We've got the U.S. hitting back with airstrikes. Where does this all lead? What are the potential ramifications of this escalation?
It's a question we should all be asking because the stakes are really high. There's a very real danger that this could spiral out of control. We could see the Houthis retaliating not just against U.S. targets, but also against Saudi Arabia and the UAE, maybe even hitting oil infrastructure, causing massive disruptions to the global energy market.
That would be devastating. Oil prices would skyrocket. The global economy would take a huge hit. And it's not just energy. The AP article also mentions that international trade could be disrupted too.
Right. Think about all the goods that pass through the Red Sea. If that becomes a no-go zone for commercial ships, the impact on the global supply chain would be enormous. We're already dealing with rising costs and shortages. Imagine how much worse it could get. It's a recipe for chaos.
So it seems like this conflict in Yemen is about a lot more than just Yemen. It's tangled up with all these other issues, especially the rivalry between the U.S. and Iran.
Yeah, that's the bigger picture here. And a big part of that rivalry is the Iranian nuclear program. The U.S. is trying to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions while Iran is pushing back, trying to assert itself as a regional power. It's a delicate balance, and any misstep could have major consequences.
Feels like we're walking a tightrope, doesn't it? One wrong move and everything could come crashing down. So how does Iran fit into all of this? How are they responding to the U.S. airstrikes in Yemen?
Well, so far, they've been pretty measured in their response. They've been careful not to overreact, but they've also made it clear that they're watching very closely. They've said that the Houthis make their own decisions, but they've also hinted that there will be consequences if the U.S. continues to escalate the situation. It's a subtle message, but it's a powerful one. Iran is letting the U.S. know that they're not going to stand by idly while their interests are threatened.
It's like they're playing a game of chess, waiting for the right moment to make their move.
Exactly. And that move could have a ripple effect across the entire region. It's a reminder that the situation in Yemen is incredibly complex and unpredictable. And any attempt to simplify it or to see it as a black and white conflict is just missing the point.
So what now? Where do we go from here? What are the next steps?
It's hard to say. The situation is so fluid. But I think it's important to remember that amidst all of the geopolitical maneuvering, there are real people whose lives are being devastated by this conflict.
It's easy to get caught up in the political and strategic aspects of this, but we can't forget about the human cost of war.
Absolutely. The people of Yemen are facing unimaginable suffering. And it's our responsibility to do everything we can to find a peaceful solution, to alleviate their pain, and to help them rebuild their lives.
It's a daunting task,
Yeah.
but it's one that we can't afford to ignore. We have to keep pushing for peace, even when it feels impossible, because the alternative is just too horrific to contemplate. You know, it's really hard to wrap your head around all of this. Like, how do you even begin to talk about peace when it seems like so many people, so many governments almost benefit from the conflict? You know what I mean?
It really is the age-old question, especially when it comes to the Middle East. No easy answers, that's for sure. But going through these two conflicts, Syria and Yemen, even though they seem so different at first glance, I'm seeing a common thread, a really disturbing one.
What's that?
Well, to me, the Middle East feels like, well, I don't know, a tinderbox. Just one little spark and the whole thing could explode. The violence in Syria, what's happening in Yemen with the U.S. getting more involved, the tension between Iran and the West, it's all so interconnected. It's honestly pretty terrifying.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It does feel like everything is so fragile right now, like we're watching this chain reaction unfolding, and we don't know where it's going to lead.
Right. And that brings us to a really important question, not just for people in power like policymakers or analysts, but for everyone, I think.
Okay, I'm all ears. What's the question?
What role should the rest of the world play in all of this? How can we actually help bring peace and stability to the Middle East? Should it be military intervention, diplomacy, economic sanctions? Or is there something else entirely, something we haven't even thought of yet? Maybe a way that focuses on talking to each other, on really understanding the root causes of these conflicts.
I mean, those are really tough questions. It feels like we keep trying the same things over and over and nothing really changes.
You're right. It's going to take a huge shift in our thinking. We can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results, right?
Definitely not. I think what you said about listening to each other, about understanding each other's perspectives, that's really key.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that this isn't a black and white situation. It's incredibly complex with a long and painful history, and there are no quick fixes. Building peace is a long and messy process, and it takes a lot of patience and commitment.
You hit the nail on the head. And sometimes it's easy to get discouraged, you know? Like, what can we as individuals really do to make a difference in such a huge and complicated conflict?
That's a fair point. But even small actions can have a ripple effect. It starts with educating ourselves, understanding the nuances of the situation, and challenging our own biases. And it means having those difficult conversations even when they're uncomfortable. Because the more we talk to each other, the more we listen to each other, the closer we get to finding solutions.
I love that. It's a reminder that peace building isn't just about governments and organizations. It's about all of us working together to create a better world.
Exactly. And it all starts with empathy, with understanding, and with a willingness to see the world through someone else's eyes.
Well said. So here we are. We've explored the devastation in Syria, the escalating tensions in Yemen, and the role of global powers in shaping these conflicts.
We've seen the human cost, the tangled motivations, and the potential for things to get even worse. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But I think it's important that we don't shy away from these difficult conversations. Because if we want to see a more peaceful world, we have to understand the complexities of these conflicts and the challenges we face in resolving them.
Agreed. Ignoring the problem won't make it go away. It's our responsibility to stay informed, to engage in meaningful dialogue, and to advocate for peaceful solutions.
And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive. We hope this has given you a lot to think about.
We encourage you to keep learning, to keep asking those tough questions, and to keep searching for those common threads that connect us all.
Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.